Football is a way of life.
This is football, chump. All you gotta do when a man gets the ball is tackle him. Get it? The man with the ball. Bring him down.
Football is about controlling that anger, harnessing that aggression into a team effort to achieve perfection. You fumble the football, and I will break my foot off in your John Brown hind parts. And then you will run a mile.
You block about as good as a jelly donut. You know that?
People can learn a great deal from a skillfully played football game.
What civilized person would play a game with the skin of an innocent pig?
Let's talk about playing football.
Here's Danger Dean with the BNW in the PNW.
Well, here we are. We're staring down the end of yet another Broncos season. Typically, this is a somber time for me personally, when the season wraps up. We have nothing else to look forward to. No more Broncos football for the next 8 months. Typically, that's a very sad thing. It's a very sad thing to have to come to grips with. We're not going to have football for the next 8 months. However, after the bloodletting that was 2020 and another losing Broncos football season, I think that a sigh of relief is a little more appropriate when discussing the feelings that we feel at the end of another Broncos season. But what does that mean for the team? Well, we've got a few months to discuss. And we're going to do that right here on the BNW podcast. Thank you so much for joining me. My name is Danger Dean. If you'd like to get a hold of the show, we've got a few different ways you can do so. First off, the social media, a few different ways there. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. If you're on any of those platforms, all you do, go to the search bar and search for the BNW podcast. Give us a quick follow. You can also shoot me an email, broncosnorthwestpodcast@gmail.com, or you can even call the show. That's right, we got a phone number here. 713-4-DANGER. 713, the number 4, DANGER. You can call in, you can text, have your voice heard on the show, have your texts read on the show, or if you want to give us a call and chit chat, we can do that as well. Do want to say a big special thanks to a few different people that have helped with the launch of the inaugural episode of the BNW podcast. First and foremost, Dan Hardy. He's the voice that you hear at the very beginning of the show. I want to say a big thanks to him. Also, the logo that you see wherever you may find the BNW podcast, Johnny Zudo, the sweet one, coming in clutch, making that beautiful logo. And then Bobby Jackson, my long-lost tag team partner, for providing the music that you hear there as well. And since I'm in the mode of introduction, I might as well go ahead and introduce myself as the voice you're probably listening to and wondering, who the hell is this guy? My name is Danger Dean. I am a professional wrestler / radio personality. However, I have never dabbled in sports talk. This would be the first time I've taken it on in this capacity. I am a diehard Denver Broncos fan. So when the opportunity came up to start a podcast about the Denver Broncos, of course, I was quick to jump on board. I've never been on the payroll for the Denver Broncos. I've never been a part of the team. I've never actually even played football in an organized setting outside of hungover turkey bowl on Thanksgiving morning. Outside of that, I'm just a humongous fan who's got an opinion. And what I would like to do is basically provide a platform for anybody who's like me. I am from Colorado. However, I no longer live in Colorado. Currently living in Washington State. And if you've ever been a fan of any team and you move away, you realize that there is a huge hole that goes missing from your soul. And for me, that was a Denver Broncos sized hole. So I'm here to provide the voice for the displaced fan. Provide a platform, whether you're listening from the PNW where I'm at right now. And I know there's an awesome Denver Broncos fan base out here. Cannot wait to hang out and party with every single one of you when the world opens back up. Or if you're from Colorado or anywhere you might be checking out the show from, I want to give you a voice. I'm hoping to have a full-on panel by the beginning of the 2021 season. We'll be talking everything Broncos, fantasy football, the whole 9 yards. So I do appreciate you for joining me on this journey. And the best part about it is I'm not paid by the team. They would never pay for my opinions. So you can guarantee you're getting an upfront, honest opinion on the team, even in situations where it might not be so comfortable. And of course, you can always share what you're thinking about the team. Or, if you disagree with me, you think I'm wrong, you want to correct me, It's an open forum. It's all yours. Just hit up the social media sites, call me, or shoot me an email.
He might look homeless, but if he asks you for money, just ignore him. It's Danger Dean and the BNW Podcast.
All right, and with the offseason comes a little bit of off-season drama. Let's dive in. John Elway announcing recently he's stepping down as general manager of the team. He's been in the position now for just a few years, and I mean, I would say in the last year and a half, there has been an overwhelming call for John Elway's job. And there was always the question, is there going to be somebody who is going to remove him from that job? Is Joe Ellis really going to stand up to John Elway and say, hey, we're going to take you out of this position. We're going to put somebody else in this position that we think would do a more productive job? And I use the word productive because if we take a look at some of the things that John Elway has done outside of signing Peyton Manning, which, I mean, at this point, that was a long time ago. What has he done since then? Outside of giving us really lackluster drafts. The 2019 draft might have been the best one that he's had since being in charge of the team. Maybe. But, I mean, if you take a look at some of the talent that he's brought in and where they are, not only on the team, but are they even in the league anymore? It's a pretty poor track record. So the fact that John Elway has taken the initiative himself to step down as general manager. Now, he's not leaving the team. He's stepping into VP of football operations. So he will still oversee aspects of the team. And the big question is he really going to be able to put his ego aside and allow whoever does come in as general manager to make the decisions necessary for the team? Is he going to allow that, or is he going to have his final say with whatever decision is to be made? Now, if he removes himself from that situation, I think that this is a step in the right direction. However, if he still feels he needs to put his hands in the proverbial cookie jar, I don't think we're going to see much of a change. He did say he plans on allowing the GM to make all the final decisions, so let's see if he stays true to his word. Broncos fans, are we rejoicing that John Elway is no longer the GM? Would you rather see him step away from the team completely, or do you think that this is enough? Curious your thoughts. Shoot me a text message, 713-4DANGER.
And now, the bad news.
And speaking of text messages, Von Miller finding himself in a little bit of hot water after his ex-girlfriend, Megan Denise, who, I'm not going to lie, I thought that they were still together, which kind of bums me out. I like them together as a couple. They were dating since 2018 and apparently just broke up. And apparently she's pregnant, which is always like a really great thing when there's a pregnancy. However, Von Miller's reaction to the pregnancy was a little much. I'm not going to really repeat anything that he allegedly said in these text messages, but it was pretty awful, the stuff that he would say, especially if this kid ends up being born. I don't know how you would really explain yourself when the kid's old enough to understand what his dad allegedly had said about him before he was born. If you're unfamiliar with some of these text messages, you can see them for yourself. I posted them at the Facebook page, the BNW Podcast, if you want to see them for yourself. Again, I'm not going to repeat them here. And I think this is even more damning if it is true because, I mean, Von Miller works with kids. He's got his charity, Von's Vision, that provides children with seeing eyeglasses. So if he's talking this way about kids, I mean, I don't know. Does that affect what he does for his charity? I don't know. It's a very, very sticky situation. Robert on the Facebook page, he did write, why are you posting unsubstantiated stuff? Did you even try to confirm any of this before spreading? I'm not saying it's true or false, just irresponsible to post and spread without any confirmation. Now, Robert, here's the thing. The only thing that was confirmed was the fact that Megan Denise did release these text messages. However, I do see where you're coming from. Did these really come from Von Miller? I think is the question that we're all asking ourselves. At this point, we don't really know the answer to that question. And I'm going to be honest, it looks a little bit hokey because the text messages were coming from a Hotmail account, which I'm not really sure who sends text messages through their email. But that right there is a little bit of a red flag. I'm not going to sit here and say that she's lying. I'm not going to say that he's guilty until there is proof. But yeah, I think that if there are allegations like this surrounding the team, I'm definitely going to bring light to it. So, Robert, I do thank you so much for commenting. And I encourage each and every one of you, if you've got an opinion on anything we talk about on the show, anything that's posted on the social media, if you want to tell me to shut up, that's totally acceptable. Make your voice heard.
Join the show, 713-4-DANGER.
I think it would be most appropriate to take a look at the season that was, as disappointing and painful as that might be. And I think it was a sign of things to come when we lost Von Miller in training camp to injury. I mean, that is a glaring piece to be missing, especially before the season even gets started. And now the question is, did he play his last snap as a Denver Bronco already? Will we see him back on the team? That question remains to be answered. And when we look at the list of the injuries that we saw, it was wild. Justin Sternad, rookie linebacker, out in August due to a wrist. Preseason. Season hadn't even got started. We're talking about preseason here. Cortland Sutton was a big loss. This could have been Drew Lock's security blanket through the season. As we've seen a lot of the chemistry that those two had started building at the end of the 2019 season and into training camp, it seemed like those two were really finding a rhythm with one another. And I think that would have really helped out Drew Lock this season had Sutton stayed upright out in September with an MCL and ACL tear. Just destroyed his knee. Mike Purcell, Albert Akwebanam, that was a tough one because that was Drew Lock's dude in college. That was his tight end. So to have those two on the same team, you were looking forward to some of that chemistry. And just when we started seeing a little of that start to come out, he goes down with injury down in November. So that was really rough. Another big loss was Jarrell Casey, the big free agency pickup, torn bicep, November. And then the cornerback position just absolutely decimated. Isang Bassi, Duke Dawson, Kevin Tolver, Bryce Callahan, all injured through the season. And I think most of those were towards the end of the season. I think those were actually all in December. So the Broncos lost 4 cornerbacks. 4 in the month of December. And I think you started to see some of that, especially in that last game when the defense just could not hold on to a late lead. Philip Lindsay going down, that was a bummer. More so because we were hoping to see him have a breakout season, but I mean, it wasn't like he was going to hit that 1,000-yard rushing mark or anything like that. And really, when he went down, it was pretty much at the point when the season was lost anyway. The injuries were just brutal. That needs to be addressed. And I don't know, is that a lack of training camp, a lack of practice? Because it is just a high amount of injuries. And I know the Broncos aren't the only team in the NFL that were victims of this, but I mean, it's like we lost half the damn team to an injury. So we're playing on practice squad and we're playing on second stringers through a good chunk of the season. And speaking of practice squad, we can't talk about the 2020 season without talking about the New Orleans Saints game. Yeah. Instead of postponing the game a day, the NFL decided that they were going to make the Denver Broncos play the game without a quarterback. All 4 quarterbacks out for the game. This left a wide receiver on the practice squad to step in as a quarterback. Now, this whole thing for me was just ridiculous. I understand that this was completely on the Broncos. This was solely on that quarterback's room. They should have obviously taken the right precautions with their masks. Keep the mask on your face, Drew. Lift the mask up. I understand they made a mistake. However, teams throughout the entire league have made mistakes. The Broncos lost their bye week because another team made a mistake and they had to play the game during their bye week. Lost their bye week. I get it. They made the mistake. Do we have to punish them like that? I mean, that was harsh. They couldn't have waited a day to get those negative tests in and then play the game with a starting quarterback, give them a shot to at least be competitive in the game. That was just probably the most frustrating thing throughout the entire season. And honestly, you can't tell me that this wasn't a punishment delved out by the NFL. Earlier on in the season, they came out with some pretty scathing comments about teams with no owners. Obviously, the Denver Broncos don't have an owner. That's putting it lightly. A lot of drama surrounding the ownership situation in Denver. It's pretty much apparent at this point it's not going to be a Bolin kid, which we kind of assumed that it might be Beth, but it looks like those relationships have kind of fallen out. So now it's starting to look a little bit more like they're going to have to sell the team, which could bring up a whole plethora of scenarios and set of issues, I guess we could say. So it'll be curious to see how that unfolds. Now, I say that because I firmly believe if this team had an owner, an actual owner in place, and not the trust that's been in place for the last couple years, I think that this game would have been postponed. They would have been able to play competitively with the quarterback, and they wouldn't have had to rely on Kendall Hilton to step in and take it on the chin, so to speak. The ownership thing with Denver is definitely going to be something that we talk a lot more about on the show in the weeks to come. And then we have to talk about Drew's big game. And I call this Drew's big game because it was the best game he looked all season. And this was against Carolina. Now, I know Carolina was a pretty awful team anyway, but this had a lot of promise as far as Drew Lock goes. Maybe this kid was finally starting to put things together. Some of this stuff was starting to click. Some of the parts on this team were starting to gel a little bit. Maybe not. The following week when the Broncos played the Bills, Drew Lock showed a lot more of what we've come accustomed to see from him in the few games prior. The sad thing is the Denver Broncos finished out the season with another losing season. That is 5 in a row. That is painful. And they're not even doing anything to remedy it because they've made the announcement that Vic Fangio and Pat Shurmur are coming back to the team, which has me scratching my head a little bit. I get that they're not trying to start this whole head coach search again. They want to have a little bit of consistency at the head coach position. However, man, the more I see Vic Fangio in that head coach position, I don't know. I don't feel confident. Mostly game management. The last game against the Raiders, if we want to take that for instance. There's been a few games this season that were questionable as far as his management towards the end of the game. Could some of these decisions change the course of some of these games? Perhaps. Perhaps not. It's hard to play the what-if game, and truly I don't really like playing the what-if game because the what-if game doesn't change the outcome. We're still standing here with a 5-11 losing season. And if we're going to take a little bit of silver lining through this whole thing, I guess that it could be the fact that there's going to be a little bit of consistency. This is probably not going to be a very popular opinion, but the end of the 2019 season, we saw Drew Lock actually start shining, and it looked like, wow, this kid actually might be the future quarterback for this team. And I think a lot of that had to do with the scheme that he was playing under with Rich Scangarello. Obviously, Scangarello was removed of his position following that season, which opened the door for Pat Shurmur. Was Pat Shurmur the answer? I don't think so, man. It was really hard to watch this season. It just seemed like Shurmur and Locke couldn't gel, couldn't see eye to eye. The scheme just wasn't matching the game. They weren't really playing to Locke's strengths rather than just trying to play within the scheme. And not catering to the player himself. Will that change next season? I really hope so. And I'm hoping that a little consistency brings a little bit of confidence, not only to Drew Lock, but to that whole entire offensive core. We also have to keep in mind that the Denver Broncos team as a whole is one of the youngest in the league. So is it going to take a little time? Yeah, it's going to take a little time. The best that we can hope for is that the coaching and the control that we have set in place are going to be enough to get the team to that next level. And for me, that next level is being competitive in the AFC West, which is, to me, one of the most competitive divisions as a whole in the league. The Broncos have to be able to go up against the Kansas City Chiefs. I mean, I know that's easier said than done, even though it's not even easy to say. It's painful, actually, to say that the Kansas City Chiefs are just really damn good. I hate admitting it. I will admit it, but man, do I hate it. Hate it. I'm really torn on how I feel about the return of Vic Fangio and Pat Shurmur. A lot of changes need to happen, more so than just John Elway in the GM role. A lot of these approaches and the way the coaches go about what they do, I think is also going to have to change as well. Another big change I think needs to happen. Tom McMahon needs to go bye-bye. We don't need Tom McMahon anymore ruining our special teams, or as I call them, our very unspecial teams. Clever, right? All right, let's talk about season highlights and season lowlights. Asked the question on the Facebook page, got some really, really great feedback. Kyle said some of his highlights were Judy's catch versus the Jets. That's the one where he caught the ball, then took like 3 steps backwards and walked it into the end zone. I'm not going to lie, that was pretty awesome. Lowlights is Judy dropping several game-changing passes. For me, I think what comes to mind is the Los Angeles Chargers game in Week 16. It was like 5 dropped passes. 2 of those, I think, were touchdowns. Really could have changed the outcome of that game. I really hope that this is something that he can overcome, and the case of the drops isn't going to be the legacy that Judy leaves behind on the Denver Broncos team. He goes on to say, defense playing incredibly well all season, despite losing just about everyone who means anything to it. You are not wrong. Von Miller, not having him around was really, really rough. It did put a lot of pressure on Bradley Chubb to kind of step up into that role, which I think he did pretty well. I would say that there's only so much a defense can do when you don't have an offense that's producing. A lot of times we did see a lot of these games get lost in the final minutes because the defense couldn't hold, but we're talking about a defense that was putting up a fight for an entire 60 minutes of ball game while the offense really wasn't holding up their end of the bargain. Low light offense going 3 and out for 3/4 of a game, causing our defense to get worn down when we need them the most. That's exactly what I'm talking about right there. You're not going to be able to rely on your defense, even if they are amazing, if your offense isn't doing anything. And I mean anything. 3 and outs, dude, 3 and out, punt, repeat. Not a lot of productivity coming out of that. Kyle also says highlights, pass catching tight ends playing like pass catching tight ends. Noah Fant was just amazing to watch. You could see a lot of his athletic ability. Albert Okwuegbunam getting hurt right as he was starting to get beast moded. I agree with you, Kyle. It would have been really awesome to see Albert O get a little bit more involved. Seeing as how he was Drew Lock's security blanket, so to speak, when they went to college. So it would have been awesome to see that translate into the pros. But again, there's always next season, Kyle. John says the lowlights for him having 0 quarterbacks versus the Saints and a never-ending injury list. That game, man, it's going to be one I think that sticks out for a while. And again, like I said, for many different reasons. Not only were we starting a practice squad member, a wide receiver at that, in the quarterback position, but I think a lot of that had to do with the fact that we didn't have an owner. If we had an owner, I think we would have been able to get that game postponed, and then the game would have at least been competitive. Would they have beat the Saints? I don't know. Would like to have seen it, though. The never-ending injury list was just brutal. I mean, it was down to like the last week. Bradley Chubb was one of the last ones to go down. I think week 16. So, I mean, we were seeing injuries pretty much every single week of the season. I absolutely agree with you there, John. Highlights, he says, the flashes of brilliance when game plans and players started to click. Josie Jewell and Alexander Johnson playing high-caliber linebacker all season long. Shelby Harris and Justin Simmons as well. Justin Simmons looking like he earned that contract. I will say he was playing like a man with his hair on fire. The defense deserves a lot of credit, because they held up their end of the deal. There's only so much they can do. Like I said, and like Kyle said, if you are putting your team into a position where they aren't scoring and you continually just have to stop the other team from scoring, you're not going to be able to, that's not a substantial game plan. You're not going to win any games doing that. So I agree. The defense, amazing. If we can keep some of that intact, and again, if we could get Jarrell Casey and Von Miller back into the fold next season, both are up in the air as far as whether or not they'll be back. I think that this would really return to brilliance. Brandon said low light for him was Shermer, unable to adjust his offense to fit players' strengths, especially Locks. Yes, I have to agree. It was really brutal. It's one of those things where you have a coach that comes in and rather than playing to the strengths of your players, you're trying to make him fit a scheme, the scheme that you have in mind. The unfortunate thing was the scheme that Shermer is trying to instill is not one that is a strength for Locke. And I think a lot of times we saw a lot of those styles clash when it came to game time. We did see some signs of brilliance with Drew Lock when it comes to the short game, which I really, really wish we could see more of that. It was really kind of frustrating to see the attempts of the long ball over and over and over. Little dinking and dunking wouldn't have hurt so bad. I would like to have seen him play a little less careless, I guess you can say, playing a little more conservative. I guess that's growing pains, and we'll see if that continues with the growth of Drew and the team. Brandon says his highlights, Bowles turning the corner. Now, that's one that's on my list as well. It was really nice not hearing holding 72 4 times a game all season long. At this point, it's like, pay Bowles, keep him on the team. I can't believe I'm even saying that. A year ago, I think everybody was calling for his job. Now, let's see what he's got. Let's keep him in the fold. And I think a lot of that is also going to have to do with keeping Mike Munchak on board. I think he was able to really create this potential game wrecker for Bowles in a good way, not in a bad way like we've known him. He also says Tim Patrick was a highlight. Tim Patrick, man, that dude was clutch. Really filling those shoes that were desperately missed when Courtland Sutton went down. Tim Patrick basically became the comfort blanket for Lock all season long. And then in the reverse of that, he really did step up and, man, he played some really pretty football this year, didn't he? Defense performing well despite major injuries all season. I think that was a big one. The defense, they didn't quit. And that's the one thing you can say about the Denver defense, where they did falter towards the end of the games. But I mean, if you're playing 4 quarters of a game, you're being productive. You're not going to be able to maintain that unless your offense is helping you out a little bit. For me, I'm going to go ahead and give you mine. My season highlights, the run game. It wasn't used as much as it could have been. I think we could have seen a little bit more use of the running backs in the pass game, but that's just being nitpicky. I think the run game as a whole was just awesome to watch. It would have been nice to see again, and again, I'm being nitpicky. It would have been nice to see Phillip Lindsay get a little bit more attention, but Melvin Gordon, man, when he came in, he looked damn good. So much so, I'd like to see them bring him back next season. I think I'd like to see the two-headed monster with another year under their belt. I think they accentuate each other very well. And then going back to what Brandon said, Garrett Bowles, huge improvement. We didn't have to hear his name every week. And I think that is a humongous step, because then it takes a lot of those detractors and it changes their trajectory as far as, do we love Bowles? Do we hate Bowles? As long as we don't hear his name every week, maybe you forget his past discretions. If Bowles can continue building on what he's been able to improve and fix over this season, I think that I don't even want to say this now. It sounds crazy, but I think Garrett Bowles could be a Pro Bowl player if he stays on the trajectory that he's on. I'm excited to see how that whole thing plays out. As far as lowlights go, man, there were plenty. Drew Lock's diminishing performance for me was just one that was just glaring. Situations where he could have made plays, but opted to throw the long ball. I think that for me, it was like, as soon as he gets into a situation where he's panicked, it's him throwing the ball as far as he can, as hard as he can, hoping somebody gets open. He's got the arm, and I can't take that away from him, but the accuracy and the decision making, I think, is it's questionable, and it's really unnerving. I really hope that this is something that can be fixed. Again, we have to keep in mind there was no off season due to COVID, so a lot of the stuff that maybe he could have improved on, he wasn't able to do until training camp, which by then, he wasn't really working on personal skills, I guess you can say. This also may have to do with the fact that he didn't have some of his biggest key offensive pieces in place, like Courtland Sutton. The unfortunate thing is that Drew Lock doesn't look like a starting quarterback. Like, he just doesn't. If you're looking at the league and other quarterbacks that are about the same amount of time in, he just doesn't look like it. Hopefully that changes, and hopefully I'm wrong, but man, what they need to do in that quarterback room this offseason is going to be telling. And what they do is going to be telling. Are they going to bring in somebody to motivate Drew Lock? Are they going to bring someone to compete with him? Because I think that's what needs to be done. Not going to get the best play out of him unless he's competing for the job. My advice to Drew Lock, let's drop dance practice. Let's leave Dancing with the Stars to the stars, and let's start focusing on football and that playbook, and maybe start working on a little bit of footwork, and maybe learning how to identify them reads. Or, keep on dancing. Assignment Broncos Country. If you want your comments read on the show, just head over to the social media pages. We've posed the question, what do you think the team needs to do to get this thing right? What do they need to do to fix it? All right, head to the Facebook page. I've got the post up right now. Just comment below. And then next week's show, I'll read the responses. I'll give you my thoughts. You can also call or text into the show. That number again is 713-4-DANGER. Reach out to us on the social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at the BNW Podcast. Broncos Northwest Podcast, gmail.com if you'd like to shoot an email, or of course, you can always give us a call or shoot a text at 713-4-DANGER. 713-4-DANGER. Until next time, Broncos Country, I'm Danger Dean, and this is the BNW Podcast.